Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Mary Alice, class coordinator. You probably remember me from months ago with student orientation, and I've touched base a couple of times with you since then. When you're about two-thirds, three-fourths of the way through your class, then we usually go ahead and have a presentation that we give to be able to let you all ask questions about what are your next steps once you complete the intro class, get a better picture of what it's like working in front end, back end, or full stack development from some actual developers. So with that information on board, then let me go ahead and introduce our two developers that are on the call with us right now, Andrew McKinnon and Jared, I always get your last name wrong. It's Cyrilla, right? Or am I putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable? He might have just stepped away from his computer too, or he might have forgotten to hit unmute. But regardless, Andrew and Jared, if either of you are available and want to either unmute and introduce yourselves or turn your cameras on quick and just say hello and wave, feel free to. Oh, Jared's having audio issues. Oh, okay. All right, that's fine. Take a moment. Andrew, whenever you're set, feel free to intro yourself quick. Talk about where you're from, where you work, and if you're front end, full stack, or back end.
For sure, yeah. Thanks, Mary Alice. I'm Andrew, as Mary Alice said. I'm from well, I just moved to Durham, North Carolina, but I'm from Chapel Hill. And I do full stack. So I actually am running my own company right now. So I'm like a development team of one. So yeah, do full stack. We have a tool that helps with customer service workflows for government folks. So, made up of basically a web app and Outlook email add-in, which also functions as an add-in. So, yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. Can you also share a little bit, Andrew, about what languages or what frameworks you work with in your line of work, if that's something that you can share, because I know
Mhm.
sometimes government jobs you can't share some information, but if
Yeah,
you
for
can,
sure.
feel free to.
Yeah, so we use Angular on the front end, so that's TypeScript, JavaScript there, and then for the back end, we also use JavaScript. So we run a Node.js. It's a little different from some of the back end architectures that folks use. We use a serverless model, but I can also speak to some other ways that folks do that. So and we run on AWS. So a lot of my time is spent using cloud tooling from AWS and doing infrastructure configuration and that kind of stuff, as well as developing like the front end UI and everything. So yeah.
Perfect. That's awesome. Thank you, Andrew. We'll probably get a little bit more information from you about like TypeScript versus JavaScript and, sorry, excuse me, using serverless backends versus using servered backends to be able to help give people pictures of that in a little bit. I think Jared hopped off and is hopping back on to see if that corrects his audio issues. So until he rejoins us, then I'm going to go ahead and go through the 2 or 3 slides that I have. Don't worry, it's not this big long presentation tonight of me just rambling and you reading slides. But I just wanted to give you all an idea of what your next steps are within the Dorado class. So you are here, you're in the intro class right now. When you complete your intro class, then you're going to do one of the 3 advanced classes that we have available to you. And we'll talk more about those in just a moment. But the advanced classes each are going to focus on a specific language or framework. So we've got the React front end class, which is going to focus on React.js. We've got the Node Express full stack class, which has you doing the serverless backend in Node and then using Express to be able to manipulate things between your backend and front ends. And then Ruby on Rails is also an option for you as well. It uses Ruby language as the backend. And then it uses Rails to be able to kind of give you sort of this pseudo front end for it. At the end of your advanced classes, then you'll be doing practicum work. And practicum work is where you get together in small groups of about 5 students to a group, and each of you will have a dedicated mentor for your 5-person group. And then you'll work on coming up with a concept and building an app, hopefully all the way to deployment within an 8-week period. So it's a very intense 2 months where you really get steeped in all of the different team development methods as far as like Agile, Scrum, how to work with other developers so that if you've got multiple people working on the same code base, how to have multiple people doing multiple things on one particular site, one particular app, and not have too much issue with, somebody fixes code here, but it breaks code here, that kind of a thing. So practicum is an opportunity to get sort of that team experience as well as sort of real world mock experience, because we do have you mimic a typical workflow of having like 2-week sprints where you focus on a particular feature or particular aspect of your app for 2 weeks and just really go hard at that particular feature to be able to get it built. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, you kind of reevaluate and say, do we need to adjust our plan? Do we need to focus on something else next? And so it'll give you that sort of same kind of workflow as if you're in a development shop environment. At the end of practicum, you can apply to the apprenticeship. It's only open to people who are living in the United States or United States territory only. So if you are living internationally, then it is not open to you, unfortunately. Whether or not you are here as a citizen, here as under a visa, under any kind of work permissions, whether you're here on asylum, refugee status, illegally, it doesn't matter. Just as long as you're physically living on US soil, that's all that matters. So whatever your status might be, residency status might be, is moot. It doesn't matter. You just have to be living on US soil in order to be able to apply for the apprenticeship. It's a 9-month full-time paid commitment. And at the end of the 9 months, then you can start looking for work, or you can opt to continue working in the apprenticeship if you want to keep working on the project that you're working with in that capacity. At the end of practicum, you can either do the apprenticeship, or if you're like, you know what, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling solid, I'm ready to jump out there, then you can go ahead and start applying to software developer jobs. We do have tools in place to help you with that process, but we don't have any direct relationships that will deposit graduates from our program directly into jobs with other companies, with the exception of our apprenticeship program. That's the only thing that kind of gets you into a paid job right at the end of your practicum. Anybody have any questions about sort of that whole class path? It's a lot of information as far as intro to advanced to apprenticeship and or to software developer job.
I do, Mary.
Yeah.
I'm curious about something.
Mhm.
Just in the advanced part, the practicum. It's so the practicum is just kind of insular to that part of the program. That project never gets published or used by a client. Just curious how that is used in terms of a portfolio that we can show employers in the future.
Yeah, exactly. We're forever working on ways that you can have the work that you do in the practicum portion be a part of your portfolio. Obviously, your code base is something that you can, link your repository to your profile pages or things like that to be able to demonstrate things that you helped build. But as far as like having it deployed, a lot of the avenues that we were using have gone behind paywalls, meaning you have to pay to use whatever services or deployment processes, I guess is the best way to describe them. And we don't want you all having that expense. And that's not an expense that we can necessarily kind of budget in since we're a nonprofit. And that can vary greatly depending on how much an app is used and that kind of a thing. So there are a lot of things that go into it. So deployment may or may not be something that happens for your practicum project, but you can definitely link the repository that shows all of the coding work that you and your team did, so that way you can at least be demonstrating that. Does that answer your question, Alexis, hopefully?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Mary.
Okay, awesome. Jared, how's your audio doing? Did you want to go ahead and introduce yourself quick while I'm kind of at a segue here?
I could do that. Yeah. I just
Awesome.
switched over to my work computer. I don't know. Ever
Yeah,
since I
that's
installed
perfectly
Windows 11, my personal computer has issues with all of my like video sharing stuff. It wants to use the wrong audio source or
Oh, that's
something.
always so much fun. Yeah, that's why I've been, pumping the brakes whenever it's like, do you want to upgrade? I'm like, no, I don't.
Yeah. I thought it was just Discord, but it's more. Yeah, I don't know what we did for introductions.
Oh yeah, sure. Just name where you're from, who you work for, and then like what kind of stack you're working with and or what kind of languages or technologies you're working with.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm in the US. I live in Colorado right now. Moved here about half a year ago from North Carolina. And right about now, I'm regretting it, but uh, um, I work at Splunk. So they're popular name in the tech industry because they do a lot of software that helps manage your stuff. They collect logs, search through it, do metrics monitoring, stuff like that. But they're not really well known outside of there. And then the stack, the back end is quite varied, mostly Java, but we have a lot of other languages in there, Go, Python, a fair bit of Python, and just a variety of different things. And our front end is mostly React, although we still have a lot of legacy Angular JS that we're working on moving over as well. So
Awesome. Thanks, Jared. Okay, so let me go ahead and continue on. Oh, was there anybody else with any questions regarding sort of class path before we move on to our next, and I think it's our last slide, actually.
Hey, Mary.
Yeah, Saul, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just have a couple of questions. One is regarding practicum. Does it combine different classes, or is it limited to the same class? I don't
That's
know.
an excellent question. So Ruby on Rails will typically always be its own. So any students who elect to take the Ruby on Rails class next, then you all will just be in a group of classmates yourself to be able to build your project in Ruby and Rails. For the Node and React students, it winds up depending on how many graduates we have from each. So if our Node class doesn't have enough graduates to appropriately portion and match the front end React students, then we might have some groups that are just React, some groups that are just Node, and some groups that are a mix. But with our last practicum group that went through, then we combined them and we had about 1 or 2 Node students to about 3 React students in each of the groups to be able to have the Node students working on building the backend and the API portion in Node in JavaScript, and then the React students would then use what those Node students built within their app to be able to pull the data forward. Does that help answer questions, Saul? Other questions?
Yes, it does. That sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, group work is always interesting. It presents its challenges, but it also presents some really cool opportunities to be able to do some things that might be difficult for you to do on your own.
yes, I understand. Thank you. I had another question. It says here that apprenticeship comes after the practicum, right?
Mhm.
So what's the application process like, or
Yeah, so it's really pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
Both at the end of your intro class, when you submit your final project, you'll let us know what advanced class you want to take. At the end of your practicum, after you've done your advanced class and your practicum portion at the end of the practicum, then you fill out another form that just lets us know, do you want to apply for the apprenticeship? Do you want to start looking for work? Do you want to take a different class with us? Because some students might have taken Node and now want to take React, or taken React and now want to take Node. So you have that option to let us know, what do you want to do next within our program? And then for students that apply to the apprenticeship, we take a look at what your work has been like through your intro class, through your advanced class, through your practicum. We take a look at where your technical skill level is. And then the Code the Dream Labs side evaluates like what projects they have going, who on those projects might be leaving to jobs outside of Code the Dream that will need to fill their vacancy. We take a look at our project pipeline as far as, do we have new clients that we're bringing on, that we're building products for, that will need to have apprentices working on those new products. So it just kind of depends as far as like what the development shop side of our organization has going on, as far as how many practicum students that are applying for apprenticeship get accepted in as apprentices. But we do our best to accept as many in as possible.
Okay. Thank you very much for answering my questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other
Okay,
questions out there before I go on to the next slide?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Yes, just wanted to find out, is there any database that we would be using in the full stack?
I think probably Jared or Andrew might be a little bit better to answer that question, because I am not a Node developer, so I don't know
Okay.
how Node is quite classified or not classified as a database, since it's serverless. So it does kind of behave in a different way potentially. Can I
Okay.
pass that over to either you or Andrew, Jared?
Sure, I would probably both have opinions. I don't know. I don't know what we necessarily recommend. I know that we teach using. We have, at least in the past, taught using a variety of different tools. Sometimes you're not developing your own or using a local database. Like, for example, in the React course, we use Airtable APIs, and so some of the apps, or a fair number, end up using a software as a service backend that provides that type of stuff, whether that's something like Firebase or Airtable or a service like that. And then you could potentially use a database. I think it's probably less common for the Node side to have done that, but in that case, it's probably going to be like MySQL, Postgres, or a MongoDB data store type database. So
Yeah, I think Jared hit it there. The only thing I'll add is for the Node.js class last summer, which I think was the first time CTD ran that class, right, Mary Alice? Yeah, we
Correct,
did.
yeah.
We used MongoDB for that. I don't know if we're keeping it the same going forward or not, but Jared's right. There's a lot of different options there, and I know for some of the front end classes that I've done, we did Airtable. So if you're thinking about getting ahead, Scott, MongoDB was the one we used for the summer. I don't know if the plan is to keep that the same or not, but
I think so far it is. I haven't heard of any changes from the curriculum team that
Okay.
there's going to be any
Okay.
drastic changes as far as using MongoDB for the node.
yeah, there's some good tooling around that. I should know this stuff, but I haven't kept up. You guys use Mongoose to
yeah,
do the interface? Yeah. Yep.
yeah.
That's a pretty, I mean, it makes it a relatively nice workflow. So yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Mongoose is something that I've looked at, and it seems I wouldn't say pretty easy, but just easier to understand. Since it's kind of I don't think it really uses tables, more like collections, kind of object based.
Yeah. I don't know if they still call it, but yeah, a common term for a lot of those is like document store database.
Yeah.
So
Always nice when something's intuitive, when something new that you approach has some intuitiveness to it. It's great. Any other questions out there that need to be addressed? Okay, so then moving on really quick, what happens next for your intro class and sort of what's our next procedure? Turn in all of your assignments, submit your final project by January 31st. You all do have a pretty decent sized gap between when Dorado class ends and when your advanced classes begin. You'll see at the bottom there in orange, March 8th to July 4th is the portion of those classes when you're working on code that is just your code and you're manipulating it and making changes and adding things to it from week to week, just like you've been doing in the intro class, how you build on your portfolio sites. You'll have projects that you do in each of those classes and you kind of build on them from week to week. And so March 8th to July 4th is just you working on your code. And then July 17th to September 15th is the time period when you'll be working in those groups in the practicum portion of it. So February 15th is the absolute latest. We must have your final project in by February 15th in order for you to be able to join the March 8th classes. That being said, I know sometimes people get into busy situations, life happens. The next advanced classes that we would be offering after those March 8th ones will begin middle of May, and it'll just be the Node and the React classes. We won't have another Ruby on Rails class until September 2023. So if you're interested in React or Node and you missed the boat for the March classes, that's okay. You can always take the May ones as long as you get your intro final project working and submit it in time to be able to join the May classes if need be. The final project is what determines whether or not you'll move on to the advanced class. I'd say probably 90 to 95% of students who turn in a final project are green lighted to be able to move on to their advanced class on schedule. Once or twice we've had a student here or there that it's like, this part of your portfolio is not working quite right, or you didn't really demonstrate that you understood that concept from that particular week of class. So revisit that week, take a look at your code, make some revisions to make sure that it's meeting the rubric requirements and making sure that you're clearly demonstrating that you understand what your code is doing there and that it's functioning properly and as expected. And then as long as you get those improvements made in time, then you can either proceed with those March classes or you can join the May classes. Any questions about sort of next steps information for Dorado class? And I did just want to show you really quick to your form. So this is your usual assignment submission form that you all have been doing for your homework assignments throughout class. When you go to submit your final project, which will be different from submitting your 6.2 work. So lesson 6.2 is the last lesson, and that's when you have your API fetch functioning and working, and basically your site is done at that point. But you do have a week at the end of class to be able to tweak anything that you want to. If you want to add some extra stretch goals, do any fun features, change your colors, whatever. You can do whatever you need to in the last week. So when you have your final project exactly how you want it, you're ready to submit it, then you'll select Intro to Programming Odin Final Project Completion for the assignment week that you're submitting, and it'll change the usual questions that you see. So normally after that, you just have your link to your coding assignment. When you select the Final Project Completion option, then it'll bring up these 3 options as far as what's the thing you want to do most next in our program. Take the Ruby on Rails, take the React, take the Node. If you feel like Intro to Programming was a blur for you and you want to retake it, you can. You can notate there. If you want to sort of take a break from classes a little bit and just work solo and then apply for a later iteration of advanced classes, you can do that. So you can say work on many projects on my own to strengthen skills. And then you can also just do nothing further at the time. If intro got you what you needed and you're good to go, then you're welcome to do that as well. So then just pick out your second and your third choice. The reason we have you do your top 3 choices is just in the event we have 35 students completing intro and all of them want to take React, and our React classes can really only handle 30 students. So 5 students wouldn't be able to take the React class of those 35 who are trying to sign up for it. So we just have it as a backup. So that way, if we can't get you into your first choice, then we'll get you into your second choice, if that makes sense. You'll still put in the link to your coding assignment, which will actually just be your main repository link. You don't have to put in a pull request here at all for that. Just the link directly to your Intro to Programming Dorado repository. Feel free to share any other questions that you have there. I don't think mindset, oh no, there is a mindset for your final week, I'm pretty sure. So it's in there. If for some reason I'm remembering wrong and there isn't, then you can just put no mindset this week. And then I think I'm actually going to be reconfiguring your form a little bit to take out a lot of these other questions. Since your last week, you don't really have any new materials. So there isn't anything that you need to, respond about for lessons or things like that. But so the biggest thing is make sure that you select Intro to Programming Odin Final Project Completion, rank what you want to do first, second, and third, preferences for once class completes, and then put in your repository link there. Questions about that at all from anybody? Everybody feel good about what they'll do at the end of class when they're ready to turn in their final project?
Mary,
Yeah.
hello. It might be already explained, but just to reiterate and understand well. So I know we don't have to apply like we apply for the intro.
Correct.
By virtue of putting our final project and putting those 3 options of priority, we
Exactly.
can choose and hopefully get a place in that desired program. But there's
Exactly. Yeah.
no application like we did the first time, right?
That is 100% correct. Yeah.
Okay.
What you put in here on your final project submission, that is your application. So you do not need to go to the codethedream.org, apply now, where you all had normally done before when you were coming into the intro class. This page that we currently have applications open for new applicants that are wanting to test out of intro and go into those advanced classes or things like that. You do not need to fill out this application. You do not need to go to this page at all. Just turn in your final project, let us know what you want to take next, and you're good to go. Yeah, thank you for
answering my
asking that,
question.
Alexis, to be able to make sure that I covered that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, no problem. So some things that will kind of help. Oh, sorry. Yes. I'm not sure who IT is.
It
But
should
yes.
say Nicole. I raised my
Oh,
hand.
there we go. That's fine. Yeah, go ahead, Nicole. Sorry, your name looks a little funny on Zoom, so I'll go ahead and change it to Nicole for you, so that way I don't get
Okay.
confused. Go ahead, Nicole. What are your questions?
I had sent you a message yesterday asking about getting placed in jobs, and you had said that beginners don't get placed in jobs. But you mentioned advanced classes. These 3 classes, Node, React, and Ruby on Rails, are those advanced classes that you're speaking of that they would get placed in apprenticeship jobs afterwards?
Exactly. So for the Node, the React, and the Ruby on Rails, those are the advanced classes. And at the end of the practicum, at the end of those advanced classes, that's where you can either apply for the apprenticeship, and as long as your technical skills are there and as long as we have space in the development shop side, then you will be accepted in as an apprentice on the Code the Dream Labs side of our organization. We are working on developing relationships with tech industries to be able to sort of funnel our graduates that have completed the advanced class and the practicum into those, but we don't have those in place yet. So there's a possibility we'll have something that funnels you directly into an entry-level job by the time you all are completing your advanced class and your practicum, when all of that wraps up next fall. We don't have those in place currently. So plan according to not having direct job placement at the end. With the exception of if you're applying for the apprenticeship, most of the folks that apply to the apprenticeship do get into the apprenticeship program as long as we've got spaces open on the
And then I have
lab
another
side.
question.
Yeah.
But regarding the apprenticeship, is the apprenticeship you get based on which advanced class you took? Because I would like to take React as a refresher, but I've never taken Ruby on Rails. I have no idea what it is. And
Yeah.
so I was just wondering about that.
That's an excellent question. To some extent, I guess it could potentially affect whether or not you get accepted at the end of your practicum. So if we have a gap where we have more need for Ruby on Rails developers on our lab side of things when your class is wrapping up, then potentially you would need to, like, you would have a better opportunity of getting into one of those roles. But all of our development shop side does projects in Ruby and Rails, does it in React, does it in Node. So regardless of what class you take, then there will likely be opportunities available. And we do our best to be able to get as many students from practicum that are applying for the apprenticeship into the apprenticeship program.
Okay.
As far as even if that means like building internal products to be able to have you all on an internal project. But it's since it's far enough out, it's hard to know for sure, like, oh, take the Dragonfish class and there'll be more spots available come September in Ruby on Rails. It's hard to kind of gauge that because it depends on the apprentices that we currently have, how many of them get hired, how quickly they get hired out of those roles to create vacancies. And it depends on what clients come to us asking for products to be built and what they want those products to be built in. So it can be really tricky. That's why I would err on the side of take the advanced class of what interests you most or where you'd like to go next over what one's going to get me into a job quicker.
Or would you suggest that I take the one that I have little knowledge of or one that I've never heard about before?
I think it would probably make sense to take one that you have some knowledge of already, just because it'll make you that much stronger and it'll give you a more thorough understanding of that particular framework or that particular language. So I would probably recommend going in that direction. Unless you're like, oh, I'm madly in love with data structures and I really want to learn Ruby language and learn how to build database structures and how to query them and pass all of that information through an API. If you're like really excited about that concept of it, then I'd say go for it. Like try something new.
I'm excited about React, but I don't know Ruby. So I do want to learn something new as well.
Yeah.
Not just be, stuck on a plateau.
Yeah.
Because I do want a good job. Like I'm searching, I want a good web developer job.
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing that I'm glad you bring up, Nicole, as far as a lot of the times the questions that we were getting in these kind of meetings that we'd have with intro students is what out there in the job market is going to be the easiest or quickest or best for me to find, what's most readily available, what kind of developers are people looking for. And it's especially now since they're having a bunch of layoffs in the tech industry, it's kind of hard to gauge that. And it can really fluctuate and vary. I don't know if Jared or Andrew, if you want to kind of chime in as far as what it was like when you were finding your roles as developers in the beginning or how you feel it is out there climate-wise as far as are they looking for more front-end developers? Are they looking for more back-end developers? Is it better to go full stack?
So I ran into an issue which I, I feel like that I overcame because if I don't know something, that I'm really good at researching it and figuring it out. But I was learning coding through the last mile. You know who that
Yes,
is?
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, okay. So I was learning it through the last mile, but then because of the pandemic, I lost like 2 years of, and didn't really
Of
get to
access to it,
do
yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like I forgot a lot of stuff. But so I'm learning all the coding. But then I have somebody that wanted me to do some work on their website, and I'm thinking, oh, good, I get to do some coding, and it's WordPress. And
Oh, wow,
it's
yeah.
not coding, it's like I felt like, wow, that was like cheating, and it's something that I had to learn all over again.
Yep.
Yeah, so I had to watch YouTube videos,
Jared's
and
laughter can tells you right there as far as like, hey, wait a minute. This isn't really
so,
coding. This isn't programming.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
some sections you can change and add, but it wasn't coding, and it was just part of a work experience that is going to end. But the thing is that how often will you run into something like that where you don't get to put your coding skills to use, and they're using drop and paste template sites like that?
That's a great question. I'm
Did
gonna
you want
let
to? I
either
mean,
Jared or Andrew
I
chime in.
could go on for a long while. I'll
Yeah.
let Andrew talk. I could have a lot of different thoughts, but yeah.
Yeah, I think for a situation where you're kind of getting a job listing or an opportunity that looks like a front-end engineering role, but actually turns out to be like a WordPress developer role,
Mhm.
or some of these other tools like Webflow, that kind of thing. Usually a more mature company, I would say, would differentiate that in the listing.
Mhm.
So, some folks will have an opening for like, WordPress developer specifically, or Webflow developer. And those, being accustomed with those frameworks is not necessarily like the same thing as uh, being a software engineer or coding, although, the skills have some overlap.
Mhm.
Um, and to the question, Mary Alice, of like what the lay of the land is. And I would love to hear what Jared has to say about this as well, because this is just based on what I've seen. But my impression is that at the really, really big companies like your Facebook, Google, Apple, if y'all have heard the acronym FANG, kind of these really, really big like tech giants, you can throw Microsoft in there too. Often the junior developer positions for those, uh, the listings that I see and the positions that I've seen a lot of folks go into don't necessarily differentiate front end and back end. And often at those much larger companies, there'll be kind of systems in place to, obviously, you have to come in with skills, but there'll be some like on ramping and kind of getting you acquainted with, if your team is just developing like an API and maybe you don't have as much backend experience, there'll often be systems in place there to help ramp you up to that. Or if you're a front end team and you don't have as much experience with front end, there'll be something in place there to ramp you up. I think the differentiation that I see in job listings and kind of talking to other companies and whatnot is once you get to the slightly smaller companies than that, where you'll see the differentiation between, oh, we need a full stack developer versus front end versus back end. And in those positions, and I think the nature of slightly smaller companies, like if you go to a startup or a mid-sized business, I think those will look for kind of a more particular skill set, because it's not as much like entering someone with certain skills into a system and then producing like the engineer that they need. It's more like you're coming with your skills, and then obviously you'll learn things on the job, but they're kind of selecting for a more specific skill set. And Jared obviously would love to tag you in here.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's too hard to say, anything too decisive about specific stuff, but let me talk on like the WordPress bit. First off, and this isn't like, I don't want to sound like pro, con, anything else, right? Is like, I mean, that's a good type of role too, right? Being a WordPress developer is a very productive thing and helps people build out websites. It's a little different than like a software engineer or a programmer. For the most part, you may do some coding, but there's definitely a little bit different process there. So places that are really looking for, say, like engineering roles, front end or back end or anything along those lines, are probably not looking at, say, the WordPress thing, but you'd encounter the WordPress type developer or any of that type of stuff more often in the sort of custom development houses that are taking on clients to build out like their sites for them, as opposed to places that are like maybe building their own product, right? It's like
Yeah.
Microsoft is building their own products, Splunk is building their own products, you know, Facebook, Google. Whereas there's, you know, really successful companies that are out there and their job is to, you know, work with clients, you know, oh, we'll do Nike's website, we'll do somebody's website.
Yeah.
Those are the places where you're likely to encounter like a WordPress solution or things like that more frequently, because it's a great way to build something out fast, whereas custom development doesn't make sense in a lot of those contexts.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, for the skills, it's again, it's always hard to tell what the market's going to look for. And I think the problem is, you know, different markets are different, right? Different places have different needs. At a very like tentative high level, I think that there's still more momentum on the front end side of looking at that and more roles there. But again, it varies a lot. And then, yeah, depending on the company, they may be like, we're not really looking at something specific. We're looking to hire somebody in who we think is strong and could be trained up, right? Like I was at IBM, they do a lot of that type of hiring. You know, Splunk's very similar, although a lot of, you know, some of those places like Splunk tends to focus more on, they're usually hiring, you know, more specific or higher level positions a lot of times. So some of them do that, but some company, it'll also depend on the company, like it was being said, especially at boutique shops, right? And I don't know if this is still the case for this specific one, but I'll choose one that I know that Code the Dream has worked with before or has people at, like say ThoughtBot is an example. ThoughtBot historically was like a Ruby and Rails shop. They've contributed a lot of content to that ecosystem over the years, right? I don't know if that's still the case, but that's the type of thing where like, oh, if you're trying to target someone specifically or anything like that, it makes sense to look at, you know, what they do. And there's different shops like that that are like, this is what we do. We work in this code base because we know it really well, and everyone here is going to work in that, and that keeps them very focused and delivering quickly, but not everywhere is that way.
Okay.
Yeah, and related to what Jared was saying too, we had a graduate year and a half, 2 years ago now, that had completed Ruby on Rails practicum, was a strong student, and got hired at a shop that initially they hired him because they were doing Ruby and Rails, and then they like restructured what they were going to be using. And so they brought him on. They're like, actually, we're going to go ahead and teach you Java because we're kind of overhauling our product and we're doing something new. Yeah. So sometimes even if you get on with a position where it's what you're expecting or it's what you've already learned and gone through, then they might be like, but we're also going to go in a different direction now, or things might change, versions might change. They might want to, you know, take out tech that they had been using for something newer that's come along. So the big takeaway that I especially want you all to kind of hear and think about as you're going into your advanced classes is sort of that big picture learning. So yes, when you take your advanced class, you'll be learning, you know, React specific things or Node specific things or Ruby specific things. But also as you're going through those lessons, try and keep a big picture of like, what am I actually doing with my code? How will this translate to other scenarios? And kind of get a better grasp on general programming concepts, because that will help you with that versatility of if you get hired into a role and then they change your tech, then you'll still know those overarching concepts that are true whether you're writing in Ruby or writing in a different backend language, or you know, knowing JavaScript well enough, it'll help you work with Angular. Maybe you haven't worked with Angular before, but the shop that hired you is going to be using Angular, so now you have to learn that. But kind of hanging on to those general programming lessons will help you pivot whenever you need to, either in a job or pivot before getting into something that you're really excited about or really want to do. So that's one thing I definitely wanted to be sure to talk about tonight. And oh, sorry, go ahead, Jared.
I was just going to double down on that. Like, I think that's an important, like, always be trying to think about, you know, how general are the things that you're picking up, and can, you know, I apply this in other places, right? Because there's certain, communities, like it's funny that it's sort of the stacks that we teach when we get to the advanced classes, but like I tend to think like React and Rails, Node not as much, but React and Rails have very cult like characteristics around like this is the way to write something, and those trends change like by the month or by a couple months. And to be honest, 90% of the time they're just wrong, because the right way to write stuff is usually a very consistent pattern across different things. And there's all tons of patterns like in React. There are just bad patterns that people like propagate all over the place because it's React. Whereas if you're focusing on the fundamental things, a lot of times you can sort of see that, wait a minute, this isn't really a good way to do this.
Yeah, sort of optimal ways to be able to write your code regardless of what language you're writing in. Absolutely. And the other thing that I always like to bring up in these meetings too is don't underestimate your history. So if you're concerned about, am I going to get into a job in a developer role, that's something that I want, remember that you have a lifetime of experiences that have brought you to this point. I have a degree in psychology, which has nothing to do technically with writing code, although I guess you can kind of argue psychology, logic, whatever. But that would make it potentially easier for me to apply for a job and get into a job with something that has sort of medical or data analysis type of backgrounds, because I had those classes when I was getting my psychology degree. So if you're coming from an engineering background, if you're coming from like whatever life experiences you've had up to this point, use those to your strengths. Even if it's just been like, oh, well, I've only worked retail. If you've only worked retail, then you understand business models, like you understand how businesses work, and you understand what it's like working with difficult clients or working with really great clients. So take all of your life experiences up to now and use them in a context that's only going to make you stronger as a job applicant. That's the other thing that I always like to bring up in these meetings too.
Yeah, I'm hearing like a lot of, in a sense, adaptability, or willing to like, which I think is just inherent in the industry, just a continuation of learning. I don't know, when you were speaking about so the basics, what translates in how we write code into other languages. I had a friend who's a developer that got hired on for a particular language. I can't remember what it was. It was a backend language, and when he started, they had a different clientele. They had to learn Ruby on Rails. They had to train him on that all over again. So it's interesting to now hear it from a different group of people that are also developers. I don't know, just a little input of my own my experience.
Yeah, and I would just hop in and add on top of, kind of the adaptability conversation here. For a lot of y'all, I'm imagining, the JavaScript is your first time getting into coding, to the intro to coding class. And every language framework you learn after this will be easier based on what you've learned already. And you'll kind of see these things like coming to fruition in terms of the patterns that are across languages, across frameworks, etc. So yeah.
Yes, definitely agree with Andrew there. And I'm terrible at languages. I've always had a hard time, like even English classes when I was in grade school, I had a hard time with English classes, and that's my first language. But the whole like verbs and nouns and sentence structure, and it's stayed consistently difficult for me regardless. But for people who I know that are really good at foreign languages, they'll be like, oh yeah, okay, I totally understand verb tenses because they change verbs in Spanish the same way they change verbs in French. And so it was easy for me to pick up French after I had already learned Spanish. So it's a similar kind of concept as far as if you understand the rules that are defining the world, then it makes it a little bit easier to work in different mediums. Yeah. So some things to consider and ask yourself kind of as you're trying to decide what class do I want to take next. Obviously, everything we've talked about tonight are things that you want to be taking into mind as far as where do I go from here and what's right for me. But so I like to just kind of share these questions to get your mind mulling as far as, what did I enjoy in the intro class? Did I like working with the API lessons and the AJAX lessons, which will be the last 2 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks of your class? Did I like doing the styling part? Did I like building the HTML files? Did I like writing the JavaScript where it was actually doing something to some data, and just kind of think about what parts did you enjoy most, what came most naturally to you, what was exciting. And then also just think even outside of the class specifically, like, do you like to have things organized and arranged? Do you like to be more creative, artistic? That'll kind of give you an inclination as far as, am I going to be more on the data side of things? Am I going to be more on the design side of things? How strong are your skills? Do you like JavaScript? Have you tried other languages and like those better? That might help give you some insight. As far as just like, what kind of work do you like? So everybody has to use tech, and if you enjoy the data side of things, then maybe you want to do something that's with a medical field, or you know, research in some kind of like research lab. And so you'd be applying for companies that build tech for you know, biopharm companies or big pharma or things like that. Maybe you'd want to look more towards something that's more social media related. And so maybe you do want to go work for Facebook or Meta or something along those lines. So keep in mind your interests as far as what might help guide you. And also think about the kinds of people you like to work with. Do you prefer working with your team? Do you prefer working with clients? Maybe you want to go more sort of project manager route where you're handling working with clients and keeping your team organized, sort of that liaison go-between. So there's so many different positions within the tech industry, as well as different avenues you can travel down. And it's really important, I think, to sort of know who you are, what you like, what you're looking for, to kind of help guide you, because it can be overwhelming to have all of the options down in front of you. And also, you definitely need to consider your personal goals, both professionally and financially. If you're in a financial situation where you're like, I really need to get into something high paying and I need to get into something high paying soon, then you might make different decisions and put up with a little bit more challenge, or, you know, want to go something that comes to you a little bit more easily and that you're more advanced in quicker than something that is different from that. Solomon, thank you for joining. Did you want to share any information? Solomon's our other mentor volunteer that was joining us tonight, to be able to give you kind of some insights as far as what it's like working as a developer in the industry. And he might not be able to unmute or share at this moment. So if you're able to, Solomon, just go ahead and unmute and interrupt me if you wanted to share any information. So yeah, hopefully tonight's been a little bit helpful. Were you ready, Solomon? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I was not, I mean, for some reason I lost the notification and I'm not at home right now, but if you guys have any question you want to talk about, specifically about full stack or backend, I can answer to that.
Did you want to share a little bit about who you work for currently, Solomon, and sort of what technologies you're working with in your job currently?
Sure, give me 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm currently working for a company called PagerDuty. It's a cloud operation management company. If you guys have worked for cloud companies or any one of, I guess, the companies who have operation on the cloud, you would know about it. It's most like when incidents happen within a certain company, let's say Bank of America, something goes down, their developers want to be notified immediately. So those events would come to PagerDuty, and according to whoever is on call scheduled for that service at that time, we send out notification using mobile. There is also a web app and text and push notifications. So stack wise, mostly using Elixir, and there is some Java and some Ruby applications here and there, but mostly it's an Elixir shop. Before that, I've been working for a company in advertising using .NET stack, mostly on C# and some front end using JavaScript, I guess, on my background.
So see, I shook my hands. You're the people that page me at 2 a.m. Not you, you know.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
that's what our team's using at Splunk to like notify us right now. So
okay. Yeah. I mean, we're the bad guys here.
but on the plus side, the PagerDuty app put the most entertaining sound notifications in the world on my phone.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it does. There are a bunch of like options for, I guess, for notifications. You can choose a sound. Yeah, we also use it internally. So when I'm on call, I get to be notified by PagerDuty app too.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing, Solomon. All right, so are there any other questions out there from students that haven't been answered? Hopefully tonight gave you a little bit of help and direction, knowing, what you want to be applying for when you finish and turn in your final project. And hopefully you have a clear picture of sort of next steps as far as what's going to happen in the coming months with our program. But please feel free to unmute, put questions in the chat. Oh, I did want to, in case anybody wasn't monitoring the chat, Chaz had asked about if the apprenticeship was based in Durham. We are based in Durham. But most of our apprentices are remote. So you do not need to be living in North Carolina to be an apprentice with our organization.
I have a quick question, and this is kind of maybe kind of left field, maybe not, but I just like an opinion. How do you guys feel about this whole chat GPT thing going on? And I mean, in my thought, there was when calculators came out, they said it was going to replace mathematicians, but that didn't happen. So do you think that's kind of going to be the same trend, or do you think that it's just going to be a tool that developers can use to be faster?
Why don't we just have an entire separate hour-long
I know we'd have to have pretty much another workshop on it.
brainstorming session? I don't know the answer. I don't think anyone knows the answer, to be honest, right? But if I were to guess, at the point it's at now, like the OpenAI and ChatGPT is a pretty big step forward in terms of like stuff that can help out, or say GitHub Copilot. But I think at this point it's still too early for it to be making any significant changes. It's got too many. It still produces too many wrong results for it to have a major shift in anything. But to become a tool to help out, I definitely see that happening at some point. That's just my guess, right? But hey, I was the person who was pessimistic on self-driving cars, so at least I'll I had many bets going at my old workplace with everyone saying they wouldn't be here by now, and man, I should go collect.
You still need the driver.
There you go. Yeah, it is interesting because I feel like a year ago I was hearing from more students in our program about like, well, I'm really interested in doing something AI or interested in something machine learning or virtual reality, and kind of leaning towards that way because it seemed like that was trending so much. And then of course, something hits the headlines and it can affect how people think or how people behave or what trends rise or fall within an industry. So I think that's just an interesting thing to observe, period, as far as, is it worth it to invest and go that route within technology, or do you want to stick with something that's been sort of tried and true up to this point? Or
Yeah, my personal opinion on this one, I don't think it's going to be a threat for developers who are either working or trying to break into IT. Definitely, it's going to be one of the tools which is going to enhance, whatever the developers do. Mostly will help automating like something like more structured, predefined tasks, but you definitely need developers to do the thinking and also provide custom solutions to, whatever is thrown at you. I don't think the ChatGPT is in a position to be able to kind of replace the developers. They will still be around, but it's going to make it easier. Something rudimentary. I want to schedule some task. You should be able to say to the ChatGPT and it will give you some pointers. Right now, I guess you do a lot of Googling, going to Stack Overflow, putting things together to come up with a final solution. I think the ChatGPT would be, I guess, the next step to in enhancing the work and probably reducing the turnaround time for development. But still, you need the people who need to do the thinking and and understanding the problem and coming up with a solution. The ChatGPT is going to be one of the inputs they take into consideration. I would say my personal opinion on this one.
Right. Okay.
I would totally agree with what's been said. I think it'll be a tool that augments developers more so than replaces them, kind of where it's at currently. Like Jared said, who knows where we'll be in 10 years. But just an interesting aside, I don't know if anybody else saw this headline, but Stack Overflow actually banned GPT generated responses to answers because they were too error prone. So it's just an interesting tidbit to throw out there.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge right now, to be honest, is that it can generate some fascinating stuff, but there's not a real knowledge of like whether it's getting something right or not. And we're in a fascinating area that you could talk about all the technical stuff, but there's all the legal stuff too. Not only is that being banned, but like today, I think it was today, like GitHub got sued for Copilot as well, over them using other people's code for the training data and whether or not that's legal. So it's a very unanswered area with a lot of open questions.
Always fun, extra complex things that roll into it. Yeah, copyrights and all kinds of things. A problem's never as simple as the problem itself. It always is involving so many other things in addition to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with the emergence of any new technology, there is going to be some sort of regulation around it and also some legality and royalty. I know for DALL-E, there is a lawsuit going on by artists, which are, if you guys are familiar with DALL-E, it's a kind of a AI-based art generation tool. It has like a ton of public image trained with, and also it can combine them and give you the kind of art you want. But at the end of the day, what that reality is going to be, who is going to own that art is also a question. I think there are things we face going forward, but definitely, there is going to be, the legal aspect of it, the regulation aspect of it, so who is going to be compensated for what. So, yeah, something to look out.
Definitely. I could chat forever on that stuff. It sort of correlates a couple of my interests. Like, you think programming is a nerdy interest? Here's an even nerdier interest. I don't know why. I've always had an interest in intellectual property law too. So that's just fascinating. Like, all of this AI stuff is really slamming all of that together. Like, I heard recently for the DALL-E stuff, I don't know where it'll land, but at least one US office said it's not copyrightable at all. Like, anything generated from it is basically public domain type stuff. So we'll see where that actually lands. But
Sure, that's got to be like the first person to say that like as a side interest. that's so
Yep.
I read a lot on it in college. I really considered going into like intellectual property law as like a graduate study field, but there's no money in it unless you're working for giant companies and helping them protect it. And I would rather help make stuff more open. So
there you go. All right. Well, I think we need to be wrapping up. So if there are any other questions, please feel free to share them now. Masuma had asked in the chat for anybody that didn't see it, if you can use one-on-one mentor sessions or mentor sessions in general to kind of get a better idea of what would be the next class, best, the best step forward for you. Yes, please do so. If you are signing up for a one-on-one and they have a spot where you can put notes about your what you're needing during your one-on-one session, then just let them know that you just need sort of general next steps guidance, that you don't need code specific help. But yeah, feel free to talk amongst yourselves, bounce ideas off of each other. You all do have that Dorado outlet channel. So feel free to talk openly there amongst yourselves as students. If you want to get ideas, share ideas, anything like that, feel free to do so. And of course, always reach out to us and your mentors if there's anything that you need. I want to thank Jared and Solomon and Andrew for being on the call tonight to be able to help share their perspectives and their experiences. We really appreciate y'all hopping on to give everybody ideas. And if you got questions, fire them off. And otherwise,
if you want to
thanks,
ask,
everybody.
yeah, I was going to say, if you want to ask any questions directly, like outside of this, I haven't done any mentor sessions, so I doubt, or I with this class at least, so I don't think people probably know me, but feel free to message me in Slack and I'll find some time and we can have a one-on-one chat if anybody needs that too. So
Yeah, same here. Same as Jared said. Feel free to shoot a direct message if you want to any follow-up.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah,
Again.
same here. I was not able to be available for the full hour. Yeah, you can Slack me and we can arrange something. We can jump on in a call or
Perfect.
have a discussion in Slack regarding this.
Perfect. And if anybody tries to message Jared, Andrew, or Solomon, and for some reason it doesn't let you, since you all are guests in the workspace, just let me know and I can sync you up so that way you can chat. All right. Well, thanks everybody. We'll still stick around in case there are any other questions. But
hey, Mary.
Yeah. Go ahead, Saul.
Okay. Thank you very much for the input of tonight's session. I just had one question regarding the advanced class. What system requirements should we take into consideration?
Yes, thank you. That's an excellent question. I will have to find the page. I know there's a page that we have that gives you an idea of system requirements as far as like what kind of hardware you should be working with for those upcoming classes. So I'll find that and I'll put it up in your class announcements channel so that way you all can make sure that you have machines that will do what you need them to do for your advanced classes before this class ends.
Okay, thank you. Because I hardly remember, but I think there are some requirements regarding the operating system, depending of the class. So
yeah, some are easier, especially for the Ruby Rails class. I think there are some that are easier to work with than others. As far as I think Linux and Windows are a little, or not Windows, Linux and Mac are a little bit easier to work with in the Ruby class, I believe, than if you have a Windows machine. But don't go out and buy a new machine just for the advanced class. Like talk to a mentor or let me know so I can put you in touch with some of the curriculum planners for those advanced classes so that way you can make sure that what you have will work before investing in anything new.
yes, would a virtual machine work too?
Yes, yeah, you do wind up using virtual machine in Ruby if you've got a Windows machine.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Nicole, go ahead with your question and just unmute yourself too.
Hi.
Hello.
I just wanted to say thank you. That's all.
Oh, awesome. All right, thanks. Yeah, Ziza, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Also, I want to ask, like, what about the timing commitment that is also needed from our side? I mean, to have this advanced class, is it the same, like 20-25 hours per week?
Yeah, it should be the same commitment as far as like how much time you need to cover your lesson materials, attend your mentor sessions, work on your coding assignments. Should be comparable to how it was in intro. You'll definitely have some concepts that you grapple with a little bit more than others in the advanced classes, but you also will have some weeks where they're built-in review weeks that you can kind of catch up or really have some time to wrap your head around concepts a little bit better. So most of the advanced classes have at least 1 or 2 review weeks built into their curriculum to help out with that.
Got it.
Yeah, but overall time commitment should be the same. For the apprenticeship, then that's a 40-hour a week full-time position. If you're tracking all the way through with your end game of being that you want to be an apprentice, and just be aware it's a 40-hour-a-week position with the apprenticeship at the end. Practicum will probably be about the same time commitment. Some students are able to get by with a little bit less because you have all of the knowledge from your advanced class and you're just kind of applying it.
Which is spring. And then at the end of that class, they put us in a 40-hour-a-week apprenticeship.
Yeah.
So not this course, I mean, but the next one.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, the
Okay.
apprenticeship part is the one that's the 40-hour-a-week. The advanced class and the practicum both will be similar weekly time commitments as the intro class has been.
Okay, got it. So it's like something like full-time job, yeah?
Yes, yeah. Apprenticeship will be full-time job. Advanced class and practicum will be same as what you've been doing in intro as far as work commitment.
Okay, got
Yep.
it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Sure, thanks. And if anybody thinks of questions after the fact, you can always ping me with them. Thanks, everybody.